I watched my husband's mistress cry at his funeral, not because she loved him, but because I'd already destroyed everything he'd built before his affair even ended. They thought they were so clever, but I was 3 steps ahead the entire time, and by the time he realized what I'd done, it was already too late. If you've ever wanted to see karma work in real time, you're going to want to stick around for this. And if you love a good revenge story, hit that like button now, because this one's going to blow your mind. My name is Fiona. I'm 34 years old, and up until 8 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was a marketing consultant for some of the biggest brands in the city. I had the corner office, the client list that made my competitors jealous, and a reputation for being the woman who could sell ice to someone living in the Arctic. But more than any of that, I had Grant, my husband of 8 years, the man I'd built a life with, the man I trusted with everything I had. We met in college, if you can believe it. He was studying finance, I was in business school, and we were both hungry for success. We used to stay up until 3 in the morning, talking about the future we'd build together, the house with the big windows, the vacations to places we couldn't even pronounce yet, the life where we'd finally made it. And for a while, it felt like we actually did make it. We had the beautiful home in the suburbs with those big windows I'd dreamed about. We had the careers that made our parents proud. We had the kind of marriage that made other couples ask us for advice. But somewhere along the way, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Grant started working late more often. He'd come home after I was already asleep and leave before I woke up. When I'd ask him about his day, he'd give me these vague, distracted answers like his mind was somewhere else entirely. During dinner, he'd be glued to his phone, typing away with this little smile on his face that he'd quickly hide whenever he noticed me watching. I told myself it was just stress from work. He was a finance manager at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city, and I knew the pressure he was under. His boss, Dalton, was notorious for being demanding. Everyone at that firm lived and breathed their careers, so I convinced myself that's all it was. Just work, just stress, just a phase we'd get through like we'd gotten through everything else. But then came the night that changed everything. I was doing laundry, something as mundane and ordinary as any other Tuesday evening, when I pulled Grant's dress shirt from the hamper, and there it was, a lipstick stain on the collar, dark burgundy, a shade I'd never owned in my life. I stood there in our laundry room, holding that shirt, and I swear I could feel my entire world tilting on its axis. My hands started shaking. I lifted the fabric to my nose and caught the faint trace of perfume. Something floral and expensive, nothing like what I wore. I checked his other shirts. More of the same. Deleted text notifications on his phone that he thought I hadn't noticed. Credit card charges for restaurants I'd never been to, hotel rooms in the city when he claimed he was working late at the office. And that's when I knew. My perfect husband, my partner, my best friend for 8 years, was cheating on me. I didn't confront him right away. I know that probably sounds crazy, but I needed to be sure. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made a single move. So I did what any woman who's about to have her life torn apart would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Raymond, and he came highly recommended by a divorce attorney I'd quietly consulted. I gave Raymond everything I had. The suspicious charges, the late nights, the changes in Grant's behavior. And then I waited. Those 2 weeks of waiting were the longest of my entire life. I'd go to work and smile through client meetings, pretending everything was fine, while my insides were completely twisted up in knots. I'd come home and make dinner for a man I wasn't sure I even knew anymore, watching him lie to my face about conference calls and late meetings. When Raymond finally called me, I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop. I couldn't go home. I couldn't risk Grant overhearing this. Raymond's voice was gentle, almost apologetic, as he told me what he'd found. Her name was Bianca. She was 38, blonde, elegant, and married to Dalton, Grant's boss, his mentor, the man who held Grant's entire career in his hands. They'd been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. Raymond sent me the photos, and I sat there in that parking lot, scrolling through image after image of my husband with this woman, holding hands across restaurant tables, kissing in the lobby of a hotel downtown, getting into her car, his hand on the small of her back in a way that was so familiar it made me physically sick. There were receipts for weekend getaways to wine country that he'd told me were mandatory work retreats, intimate dinners at places we'd talked about going to for our anniversary, but never did because he was always too busy. I don't know how long I sat there crying. At some point, the tears just stopped, and all that was left was this hollow, burning rage in my chest. I drove home in a daze, those photos still open on my phone, and when I walked through the door, Grant was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, pretending to work. I didn't say a word. I just walked over, picked up my phone, and started printing every single photo from my email. One by one, they came out of our printer. Grant looked up, confused at first, then alarmed as he saw what I was printing. I gathered them all up and threw them on the table in front of him. They scattered across his keyboard, across his paperwork, across the life we'd built together. His face went completely white. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he started with the denials. It wasn't what it looked like. I was being paranoid. How dare I invade his privacy by hiring someone to follow him? His voice got louder, more defensive, angrier. He stood up and tried to turn this around on me, saying I'd been neglecting him, that I was always too focused on my career to pay attention to our marriage, that I'd pushed him away, and something inside me just snapped. I screamed at him, asking him how long he'd been planning to make me look like a fool. My hand moved before my brain could catch up, and I slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through our kitchen, and for a second, everything went silent. Grant's hand went to his cheek, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me, but fear of what I might do with this information. And that's when he finally broke. He confessed to everything. The affair with Bianca, the lies, the hotel rooms, the weekends away. He told me it just happened, like they'd somehow accidentally fallen into bed together over and over again for 6 months. He said Bianca understood him in ways I didn't anymore, that she made him feel alive. But here's what really caught my attention. As he was begging me not to tell anyone, especially not Dalton, I saw pure terror in his eyes. His hands were actually shaking, and that's when I understood something crucial. Grant's entire career, everything he'd worked for, every promotion he'd gotten, every opportunity that had come his way, it all came through Dalton. His boss wasn't just his superior. Dalton was his mentor, his sponsor, the man who'd personally groomed him for the senior position he was about to get. If Dalton found out that Grant had been sleeping with his wife, Grant wouldn't just lose his job, he'd lose everything. His reputation in the industry, his network, his future, everything. I didn't ask for a divorce that night. I didn't throw him out. I just looked at him and told him I needed time to think. He seemed relieved, like maybe he'd dodged the worst of it. He actually had the audacity to hug me and say we'd work through this. I let him hold me, and the whole time my mind was racing. I didn't want to just leave. I didn't want to be the heartbroken wife who quietly disappeared while he got to move on with his life and his mistress. I wanted him to lose everything the way I'd lost everything, and I was going to make sure of it. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I smiled at Grant over breakfast. I asked about his day. I played the dutiful wife trying to save her marriage, and he bought every second of it. But behind the scenes, I was digging. I went through every bank statement, every credit card bill, every expense report he'd ever filed with his company, and that's when I found it. The thing that would bring him down. Grant had been charging personal expenses to his company card, hotels for his affair, dinners with Bianca, even jewelry he'd bought for her. He'd been hiding it all under fake business meetings and client entertainment. It was embezzlement. Small amounts, carefully disguised, but it was there, clear as day. He'd been stealing from the company to fund his betrayal of me, but I didn't stop there. I hacked into his email. I know, it's illegal, but at that point I was far beyond caring about rules. What I found in those emails made me want to burn everything down. Messages between Grant and Bianca talking about their future together, how they were going to leave their spouses once the timing was right. Once Grant got his promotion and secured his position, they had it all planned out. But the worst part, the part that still makes my blood boil, was reading what they said about me. Bianca called me boring, frigid, a career robot with no personality. Grant agreed. He said living with me was like living with a roommate he was obligated to be nice to. They laughed about it. They actually laughed about how pathetic I was, sitting at home completely clueless while they built their little fantasy future. I recorded a phone call between them one night when Grant thought I was asleep. Bianca's voice was so smug, so satisfied, as she talked about how she couldn't wait to finally be with him publicly. Grant said he was just waiting for the right moment. After the promotion, after he'd secured everything, then he'd leave me. They were using me, both of them, and they had no idea I was about to destroy them both. I started small, anonymous and untraceable. I created an email account that couldn't be linked back to me and sent a detailed report to the company's ethics hotline. Every receipt, every fraudulent expense, every hotel room Grant had charged to the corporate card while claiming he was entertaining clients. I included dates, amounts, and just enough detail to make them look closer. Within a week, Grant came home looking like he'd seen a ghost. The company had launched an internal audit. They were investigating his expense reports. He was panicking, pacing around our living room, running his hands through his hair over and over. He kept saying it was probably routine, that these things happened all the time, but I could see the fear eating him alive. And I just sat there on the couch, sipping my wine, asking if there was anything I could do to help. He had no idea I was the one who'd lit the match. But that was just phase one. I needed to make sure Dalton knew exactly what his wife had been doing. So I did something that still makes me smile when I think about it. I arranged to run into Bianca at a networking event. I played the sweet, naive wife who just wanted to connect with the other spouses in Grant's company. She was so smug when she saw me, barely able to hide her satisfaction. We got coffee, and I made sure to compliment her marriage, to ask her advice about keeping romance alive after years together. She ate it up. She actually gave me tips on keeping a man interested, all while knowing she was sleeping with mine. I mentioned how stressed Grant had been about work lately, suggested maybe Dalton could mentor him more, help him through this rough patch. She assured me Dalton thought very highly of Grant, that he had big plans for him. I thanked her, hugged her goodbye, and walked away, knowing I'd just set the final piece in motion. The company's annual gala was 3 weeks away. It was the biggest event of the year. Every employee, every executive, every spouse would be there. It was where promotions were announced, where deals were made, where reputations were built or destroyed. 2 days before the gala, I sent Dalton a package. No return address. Inside were printed photos of Bianca and Grant, time-stamped emails between them planning their affair, financial records showing the company money Grant had stolen to fund it, and a simple note that said, "Thought you should know who you're promoting." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The night of the gala, I wore red, a dress I'd been saving for a special occasion. Grant told me I looked beautiful, kissed my cheek, completely unaware that his entire world was about to implode. We arrived at the venue, and everything seemed normal at first. People mingling, drinking champagne, making small talk. I got myself a drink at the bar and positioned myself where I could see everything. Then Dalton arrived. He walked right past the crowd, right past the pleasantries, straight to where Bianca was standing with a group of wives. The look on his face made everyone go quiet. He didn't yell at first. He just held up his phone, showed her something, and asked her if she wanted to explain. Bianca's face drained of all color. She tried to pull him aside, to have the conversation privately, but Dalton was done with privacy. His voice carried across the room as he asked her how long she'd been sleeping with Grant. The entire ballroom went silent. Every head turned. Grant tried to make himself invisible, tried to edge toward the exit, but Dalton spotted him. He walked over, and I'll never forget what he said. "You're fired." Security will escort you out. If you ever use my name as a reference, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." Grant stumbled out of that gala like a man who'd been shot. I followed behind, calm and collected, and drove us home in complete silence. He kept trying to speak, kept opening his mouth and closing it again, but what could he possibly say? When we got home, he finally found his voice. He begged me to help him, to call Dalton, to vouch for his character, to tell the company this was all a misunderstanding. He needed me to save him. After everything he'd done, he actually believed I would save him. I looked at him standing there in our living room, this man I'd spent 8 years of my life with, and I felt absolutely nothing. I told him I had nothing to say that would help him. His face crumpled and he asked me what he was supposed to do now. I told him that wasn't my problem anymore. The fallout was spectacular. Bianca immediately turned on Grant to save her own marriage. She told Dalton that Grant had pursued her relentlessly, that he'd manipulated her, that she'd tried to end it multiple times, but he wouldn't let her go. She painted herself as the victim and threw Grant under the bus so fast it would have been impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. Dalton didn't buy it entirely, but it gave him an out, a way to save face. Grant tried calling Bianca, texting her, showing up at places he thought she'd be. She blocked his number, refused to see him. She'd gotten what she needed from him, and now that he was worthless, she wanted nothing to do with him. The betrayal on his face when he realized she'd abandoned him was almost poetic. But here's where it gets even better. Word spread fast in their industry. Grant's name became toxic. No one would hire him. No one would even take his calls. His reputation was completely destroyed. He ended up taking an entry-level position at a small firm, making a fraction of what he used to earn. He had to move out of our house, of course. I made sure of that. He's living with his parents now, at 37 years old, trying to rebuild a career that will never recover. Every door that Dalton had opened for him slammed shut. And Bianca? Dalton divorced her and took everything in the settlement, the house, the cars, the country club membership, all of it. Last I heard, she's living in a small apartment across town, completely cut off from the social circle she used to queen over. She tried reaching out to Grant once, I guess thinking maybe they could finally be together now that they'd both lost everything. But Grant had nothing left to offer her. No money, no status, no future. He told her to leave him alone. The affair that was supposed to be their great love story ended with them hating each other and blaming each other for ruining their lives. Grant came to me one last time, about 6 months after everything fell apart. He showed up at my door looking 10 years older than he was. He apologized. He cried. He said he'd changed, that losing everything had made him realize what really mattered, and he begged me to give him another chance. I stood in the doorway of the beautiful home that was now solely mine, and I told him the truth. I said I didn't forgive him, that I probably never would. But I thanked him, because he'd taught me exactly what I was worth, and it wasn't being someone's backup plan while they destroyed me. It wasn't being the safety net for a man who saw me as boring and disposable. He asked what he was supposed to do now, and I closed the door in his face. Today, I'm thriving. I got that promotion I'd been working toward. I moved into a stunning apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that takes my breath away every morning. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I started traveling to all those places Grant and I had talked about but never went to, and for the first time in years, when I look in the mirror, I actually recognize the woman staring back at me. She's stronger, wiser, and she doesn't settle for less than she deserves anymore. Grant is still struggling, still trying to claw his way back to relevance in an industry that wants nothing to do with him, still living a life that's a shadow of what it used to be. And Bianca? She's alone, bitter, and forgotten by the people who used to worship her. They destroyed each other, exactly like they deserved to. They say living well is the best revenge. But honestly, sometimes revenge is just making sure they can't use your love as a safety net while they destroy you. I didn't just walk away. I made sure he fell exactly as far as he deserved to fall. Here's what I learned. Never set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And if they betray you, don't just leave. Make sure they understand exactly what they lost, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, because you deserve someone who sees your worth, not someone who treats you like a placeholder while they chase something shinier. If this story taught you anything about karma, self-worth, or sweet, calculated revenge, hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, I've got more stories that'll remind you why you should never underestimate a woman who's been pushed too far. See you in the next one.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.